So that is my office, and that's the downtown of Chico. It's super nice, bright, sunny, blue sky. I'm going to meet my professor. He's one of my favorite professors in computer science at Chico State. I'm gonna meet with him and we're gonna shoot this video. We're gonna talk about what kind of expectations does professors in United States have for international students when they come for masters or even an undergraduate program. And then, we'll also answer some of your questions which you asked on Instagram. So I don't know if I'm gonna split this into two videos or one, depending on how our conversation goes. That is super cool building, Chico State design. I think it's just like a 2 years old building, and that's Chico State, and this is also Chico State, and that is also Chico State. I'm gonna do a proper tour for my college, but not in this video. That's computer science building, and that's where his office is. So I'm gonna go into his office and we'll film this video. So that's his office, and that's my professor. Hi.
Hi, Yudi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing pretty good.
He is Todd, and Todd, meet my camera.
Hi, camera.
And that's his office. See, he's so Indian culture oriented. I mean, that's probably not Indian culture, but that definitely is. And then that's where I am, somewhere there. And that's our badge. This is so nice. Thanks for keeping our picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to see you again.
Yeah. Okay, so we are gonna do this video, but before we get into this video, I want to introduce Todd. He is one of our he was and is still best professors, I think, in Chico State for computer science. He teaches a lot of classes in computer science. For example, software engineering. I learned software engineering from you, and then object-oriented, advanced object-oriented programming, and then systems level programming, and I think that's 3 classes I took. So he teaches a lot of classes, and he is used to Indian students, and he has taught us, and you're versed with a little bit of Indian culture, and you know how Indian culture plays. And so thank you for doing this, and thank you for giving your time and talking and explaining our audience what is all computer science about and answering their questions.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
How should a student prepare? Like, let's start with that. Like, how should a student who's done his bachelor's in computer science or undergraduate in computer science or IT, how should he prepare? Because he'll have some knowledge of computer science, and he's now thinking of getting his or her master's. How should they prepare for computer science in America?
Well, I think you touched on the primary aspect, which is it being applied. Now, certainly, that's going to depend on the program that you select. Some programs are going to be much more theoretical. So the university system here in the United States, generally, there are 2 tiers. One is what we'd refer to as R1 schools, and these would be research universities. And the primary purpose of attending there is, particularly at a graduate level, is if you intend on doing research as a career.
Right.
So certainly there's hands-on coding expected, but you'll find that it is very much theoretical. I myself am and not in an R1. I had decided that I enjoyed the teaching much more.
Right.
And the professor's load actually differs between an R1 university and this university, this state school that we're at, which is at an R1 university, a professor may teach 1 class one semester and 2 classes another semester maybe. So 2 or 3 classes the entire school year is all they teach, and then it's usually graduate assistants who are left teaching the bulk of classes.
Right.
So if you come to the United States, or obviously even American kids who get their undergraduate degrees here at an R1, they don't see a lot of the professor. They see a lot of the graduate assistants
That's
teaching a lot of those
interesting.
courses, because those professors are spending most of their time doing research, and so the classes they do teach tend to be those higher level graduate level classes for those who are going to be doing research with them. Whereas here, the teaching load for us professors is generally somewhere between 3 and 4 classes a semester, so we're teaching between 6 and 8 classes in a school year rather than
Right.
2 or 3. And we have expectations of doing research, but we don't get a lot of research done during the school year. A lot of that primarily happens when we have time off during the summer. Anyway, for all that being said, getting back to your question about preparation, assuming that you're coming to a university that I'm at, this style of school is going to be hands-on, and your best prep is going to be to get yourself some hands-on experience prior to coming. So our program, we are definitely sending representatives to India, and we're trying to recruit some Indian students, and we certainly have some idea of what preparation level they're at, and we're actually tailoring some classes to help get them up to speed. But all that said, the more hands-on experience you have before you come here, you're going to be so much better off. I would also say that part of that hands-on experience is exposing yourself to more than simply the Windows operating system. I think for people who say they're familiar with computers but haven't dug in that deeply, the vast majority of them are familiar with the point-and-click world of Windows and Microsoft Word and maybe some programming in the Microsoft environment. And then to a much lesser degree, it would be on the Macintosh computer. But if I had to specifically provide a general recommendation, it is be familiar with more than one operating system. If you're familiar with Windows already, that's great, but try Linux. I would say maybe you know Mac, maybe you know Windows. Pick a second one, pick Linux. Linux, if you're unfamiliar completely, it's attractive because it's free. It'll install on almost anything. If you have a Windows computer, you don't need another computer. You can actually run it on top of Windows.
Yeah, I almost see a question. I think when you say try another operating system, do you mean just install them and do stuff on that? Or like what do you want to try? Like what, just use it as a daily operating system?
Absolutely. This fictitious person has been using Windows daily for years, right? If you've got a year to get ready, use that year to sit down and use Linux daily.
Oh, wow, okay.
I mean, it just like anything new, riding a bike for the first time is very painful, and it's hard to get anywhere until you learn how to balance. It's the same with learning a new operating system. It's going to be painful and slow, but it'll do a couple things. One is having the perspective of how to do the same thing in 2 totally different operating systems really provides a lot of additional information as to how computers actually are working when you see the same thing done differently in different operating systems. So yeah, I think as far as hands-on, that's certainly one thing to consider. And then since we're talking about computer science and programming, I obviously would say hands-on activities involving writing programs.
And is there any particular language you would want them to focus on? Because I think in India, when you say programming, all of a sudden the mindset is like, oh, is it C, C++, Java, .NET, what, what specific?
So I think part of the answer to that, so I have my own biases, and I'll confess those in a moment, but I would say that the broader answer is if you have an idea of the university or universities you think you might want to go to, then I would look at their programs and determine, 1, what operating system are they using, and 2, what programming language or languages do they tend to focus on. Because obviously it makes the most sense to have some proficiency in the operating system that the school uses that you're attending. My own biases are as far as programming languages would be C and C++. And the reason for that, if I could pick a language to contrast with that, would be Java. So for a while, this program at an undergraduate level for many years had taught C and C++. And then at one point, they switched over to Java, the program did. And so for a few years, they taught Java. Okay. And our computer science program, like all computer science programs, has what's called an industry advisory board, which is comprised of local leaders in industry that have some relation to computer programming, right? Maybe they're offering contract services or something like that. And we generally, once or twice a year, we will meet with this advisory board and just have discussions about what an industry should we be focusing on, what about our program is working or isn't working. And one of the outcomes of us switching over to Java was a common theme we were getting from the industry advisory board was, they actually don't know as much about the internals of what's really happening with the computer and with the programming language when they're using Java. Java is high enough that it's hiding a lot of details that they weren't learning. Yeah. So we switched back to C and C++. I should say C++, but as a language, it's just a superset sitting on top of C. So, but C++ is very much a language that's considered difficult, and with good reason, because it doesn't hide the nasty details of what's happening with the machine from you.
Yeah, and I think that reminds me a very good topic which I wanted to cover is computer science in general. In India, if you say that I'm doing master's in computer science or bachelor's in computer science, it's more software. It's more like, it's not like the operating system level. It's not systems level. It's more like, web development. It's more like software programming, So what would you define computer science as? Like, what's your definition? Like when someone says, I am doing my master's in computer, like I want them to understand what they are getting into, like not have an overview of idea like, oh, computer science means I have to write some programs and it's going to be building a Facebook or Instagram or something like that.
So first let me say that things like web programming and mobile programming, those are all very honorable and valid areas to specialize in. And you'll certainly get some of that, I think, even at a master's level. I imagine there are classes you can take. But to make generic the term a master's degree, the assumption is that you are a master craftsman at your domain. And when you're a master craftsman, it isn't knowing how to flip some switches and be able to brag about the color of the computer or whatever. You have a very clear understanding of both how that software is interacting with the computer, as well as advanced algorithms, things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and data mining and data intelligence. These are all areas that you would be expected to be learning something about in a master's program.
Okay. And now I want to know, imagine a student came from India, he did his bachelor's in computer science and now coming for a master's in attending one of your class in a master's level class for computer science. What would you expect him to know? As like, what's the basic level of knowledge you will have, and like he should have or he should possess when he's attending any class of computer master's level class? Let's say object-oriented programming, for example.
Well, so for that class specifically, a lot of it depends on where in the program they are. So we certainly have some understanding of the skill set that they'll come with, and so we do have some tailoring of classes for that. If for my specific, say my advanced object-oriented class, there would be an assumption that they're already familiar with C++, primarily at a syntactic level. So an understanding of all the constructs and variables and the loops and maybe even as far as pointers, if I just had to pick actual technical syntactic things in the language. but as far as the philosophy of me teaching it, you aren't going to find yourself spending a lot of time looking in a book, learning the theories behind advanced object-oriented programming. I want you from day one to be opening up your programmer's editor and to be writing code and compiling it and trying it, changing it. So some comfort already with that process of writing code and compiling it, that the compile, edit, test cycle. And I guess some aptitude for how do you approach a problem from a programming perspective to solve it. Certainly, I would assume if you've reached the point where you're pursuing a master's here, you've already decided that, yes, I enjoy programming and this is for me. But that said, you know, there are people, and primarily this is my undergraduate students that I get in my Introductory to Programming course. I just tell them outright that programming's an art like anything. So, for instance, if I go to the art department, I can take their courses all day, and I'm not going to get much better than drawing stick figures, no matter. Because I just simply don't have that skill inside me. And that's the same with programming. There's some people who are just not suited to it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, that probably doesn't apply to your audience, since they're
it can, and I that's what it can apply to that too, because I think there are classes which, you know, they might be good at analytical skills, and they might be good at, you know, applications programming more than systems level programming, and they need to, I think, choose their courses according, if there is an option, then, and they can choose or switch the majors, and that's where that switch needs to happen, instead of struggling and realizing, you know, that self-realization which you said, that maybe this is not for me, but I'm really good at this part and I need to switch to that. So, and you mentioned one thing interesting is problem solving. How do one develop problem solving skill?
That's a good question, because I would say there's a failure to teach it by and large at all levels. I mean, as university professors, I would say there's several professors in the university community in general. I don't want to single out our school or any professor, but just in general, teaching problem-solving skills is tremendously difficult. And so if you're lucky, you know, you may have a mentor who's really good at doing that. I would say by and large, you're probably going to be left to your own devices to discover that. And I don't think there's going to be any way that you're really going to learn problem-solving skills other than sitting down and actually writing code and solving, And if you have to start with something simple, that's fine. You have to have that willingness to say, okay, now I'm going to try something a little harder, and a little harder. And it's difficult to do. I think I'd say that the most difficult thing to do about it is you don't have to do it, right? No one's sitting down with you and saying, right now, today, you're going to write this program, and then you're going to make it a little harder, and then you're going to make it a little harder, and then you're going to try approaching it a different way, right? This requires a lot of self-discipline and a willingness to do it. And I think to be successful, those who are most successful are those who have that self-discipline and are willing to explore this on their own and try and build some of those skills on their own, rather than saying, I'm going to wait till I get admitted and I'm going to sit down and they're going to teach this stuff to me.
Yeah, and that's a good, because I get a lot of questions. Hey, I have an admit from this college and they have this classes, so are they going to teach me this? And they will probably, but you need to be proactive and learn some of it before getting to the day one of that class. And you mentioned about mentor, and I think Indian education is a little different, and you know, I was not aware of concept of office hours. I mean, I don't think I had it in my bachelor's, that there was no thing like called office hours where you can just go to a professor and talk about anything. And I didn't have like an opportunity to go on lunch and coffee and, you know, hang out. And I'll put a picture somewhere. We went to his house. He hosted a party. and we had so much fun. So that's probably why you're like so super cool. But see, we don't have that. So is any international students or Indian students or any international student in general can come to you if they are in Chico State and ask you if you can mentor them for computer science and help them with their computer science journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of myself personally,
okay, I want to end the video right here. Come back next week and we will continue this answer and many more answers which I asked him. In the next video, we talk about how a long-lasting relationship with professors can help you get a job, how to get a job, how to approach a professor for getting a TA, RA, assistantship and grader's job. And then, eventually he also talks about how to be a successful student in United States. Come back in the next video and we'll continue this topic. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. And Todd, if you're watching this video, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. I'm sure all the students who are watching this are gaining a lot of insights. And so thank you for your time. And until our next episode, keep smiling and keep hustling.